They never knew Earth had been watching. When the Galactic Empire convened to evaluate primitive species for annexation, Earth was listed as barely evolved, technologically backward, and politically fractured. Their analysis was not entirely wrong. Humanity had barely stepped beyond its solar system, and its history was riddled with wars, internal chaos, and environmental decay. But what they didn't see, what no Empire scout or analyst detected, was that Earth had stopped broadcasting not out of failure, but out of choice. 100 years ago, Earth's last world war nearly wiped the species out. In its ashes, something strange happened. Governments collapsed, but not into anarchy. Instead, underground coalitions formed. Secret knowledge was pooled. Scientists and visionaries disappeared from the public eye. Wealth and data vanished into shadow networks. Across the Moon and Mars, anonymous outposts were built, quietly, silently, out of reach of the global news feeds. The Galactic Empire didn't detect these things because they didn't know where to look. Their scanners saw what Earth wanted them to see: disorganized military satellites, old chemical rockets, and flickering power grids. They didn't see the automated AI complexes buried beneath the Arctic ice. They didn't detect the gravitational anomalies near Jupiter, signatures of cloaked shipyards. Counselor Virex, who led the expedition review, mocked the planet. A death world in name only. Emotional, irrational bipeds still obsessed with tribal politics. Harvestable, manageable. The other council members laughed. To them, Earth was a blue marble of exploitable labor, raw materials, and untapped genetic stock. Virex's recommendation was swift and confident: full-scale annexation. Begin with outer settlements, neutralize resistance, and pacify population centers with cultural programming and orbital precision strikes. They thought it would be simple. Another acquisition. Another species too naive to resist the Empire's cold efficiency. What they didn't know was that Earth had been preparing for this very moment, not for decades, but for centuries. Ever since the Voyager signals left the solar system, Earth knew they weren't alone. For every decade of silence from the stars, humanity only grew more paranoid, more prepared. The world wars taught humanity one truth above all: enemies don't always announce themselves. In the shadows of forgotten military bases, an artificial intelligence known only as Sentinel monitored deep space transmissions. It didn't sleep. It didn't reason like humans. Its only directive: observe, prepare, adapt. When the Empire's scout ships began cataloging Earth's atmosphere, Sentinel flagged them. When their data siphons slipped past Mars' orbit, Sentinel tracked them. No alarms were raised. No governments were notified. Humanity's survival plan didn't depend on public response. It depended on absolute silence. The first formal Empire transmission arrived through deep space quantum relay. A diplomatic broadcast filled with promises of integration, prosperity, and progress. They offered universal currency, health upgrades, neuroharmony. But their tone was unmistakable. Beneath the gilded words was domination. They were not requesting entry. They were stating intent. What they received in return was nothing. No reply. No panic. No counter-broadcast. From Earth's surface, silence. From its skies, stillness. But below that silence, something was changing. In Antarctica, geothermal reactors powered up after 50 years of dormancy. On the Moon, radar dishes shifted subtly, focusing inward, not on the Empire's ships, but on Earth's own orbital layer. On Mars, relay stations activated deep-buried silos, and data surged across encrypted networks never charted by any Empire AI. The Empire didn't see this. They didn't even know where to look. Their arrogance blinded them. Their protocols hadn't changed in 1,000 years: invade, overwhelm, assimilate. That strategy worked for every species before. But Earth was not every species. Humanity had evolved in chaos, on a world where everything tried to kill them: weather, predators, even each other. They hadn't conquered space through peace. They did it through obsession, desperation, and madness. They didn't just build technology. They hardened it in war zones. Every advance had been forged in the crucible of extinction. Now, as Empire fleets approached, Earth watched through the eyes of its oldest ghosts. Old satellites once believed decommissioned now flared to life, feeding data directly into Sentinel. The AI didn't ask for permission. It didn't alert presidents or military generals. It simply ran its protocol. Operation Midnight Sky. Humans had hoped they'd never need it. But hope was never part of the plan. The quiet hum of shipyards near Neptune grew louder. Drones built in secret began to stir. Stealth ships, once nothing more than black-budget rumors, detached from the lunar surface and drifted silently into position. None of them carried crews. They didn't need to. The Council believed Earth was a species bound by hesitation, confusion, and inexperience. But they had made a fatal mistake. They thought Earth was primitive. They thought silence meant weakness. They didn't understand what Earth really was. Earth was the eye of the storm. It had spent the last 100 years pretending to be quiet, because that was how predators hunted. It didn't show its claws until the prey stepped too close. And now, the prey had crossed the line. Sentinel logged the incoming fleet and sent one final pulse through the old Earth defense network. Across hidden hangars and buried silos, red lights blinked in unison. Awaken. The time for hiding was over. The time for humanity to respond had just begun. The Galactic Empire's approach was methodical. Their doctrine, refined over millennia, left no room for uncertainty. First contact would be dominance, not diplomacy. Orbitals established control grids above Earth within hours, deploying data scramblers to blind satellites and jam terrestrial communication. Then came the demand: complete surrender within 3 Earth days or planetary correction protocols would initiate. The transmission, delivered in perfect human languages, wasn't a warning, it was a decree. Empire Command assumed Earth would beg. Their lesser targets always had. The silence from the surface confused them. No groveling. No negotiations. Just silence. In orbit, Empire's ships moved into strategic alignments. Their vessels, sleek, luminous, beautiful in form, hovered like divine judgment. Drone arrays released across the stratosphere, scanning population density, military structures, cultural centers. One commander remarked how vulnerable the species looked. They still burn carbon. He laughed. Their skies are naked. He wasn't wrong. Earth's orbital layer, to their sensors, appeared obsolete. But it was a lie. A very old and deliberate lie. On the 3rd day, Earth missed the Empire's deadline. No ambassadors arrived. No messages were sent. The Council authorized what they called a light demonstration. A warning strike. They selected a target, an isolated island chain in the Pacific, minimal population, minimal resistance. The goal was psychological: humble the species, display the cost of disobedience. One cruiser descended and fired a low-yield energy beam. In seconds, the island vanished beneath the sea. That moment triggered the sequence Earth had buried for a century. 17 seconds after the strike, a dormant frequency, untouched for 80 years, pulsed out of a satellite thought defunct since the 1990s. Its message was not human-readable. It was a machine protocol. The signal bounced between ancient orbital husks and buried Arctic receivers, awakening command threads and codebases predating even modern operating systems. Earth's real response system wasn't public. It never was. In the depths of the ocean, something stirred. A long-forgotten facility, written off by global historians as a myth, came online. It was not built by any one nation, it was forged by desperation, funded in whispers, buried beneath treaties and fake disasters. From its core, a vessel emerged, not built to match the Empire in elegance, but to destroy anything it saw. The hull was plated in obsolete alloys, not because they were weak, but because they confused advanced scanners. Its reactor pulsed with energy levels the Empire didn't even register as military grade. Above, the Empire observed the anomaly, confused. The ship rose vertically, dripping water black as the void. Its identification transponder read a single word: Cerberus. Before they could react, it fired. A single projectile, unguided by standard metrics, launched into orbit and struck the Empire's warning cruiser. There was no warning. No energy spike. No shield impact. Just impact and obliteration. The cruiser folded inward, its antimatter core rupturing silently into light. Earth had just claimed its first kill. Panic struck the Empire's fleet. Ships realigned. Orders scrambled. Earth had never fired on them before. Now, it had annihilated a cruiser with tech that shouldn't exist. Analysis teams scrambled to make sense of the weapon. They couldn't. Across the globe, hidden sites activated. Human command didn't issue grand speeches. There were no public broadcasts. Only rapid deployment. Dark silos opened. Hypersonic jets took off without destination announcements. Autonomous underwater drones moved in formation. Everything acted with surgical precision, as if rehearsed for generations. Because it had been. From the moon's dark side, another signal fired, this one straight at Mars. There, an old relay station connected to a dormant asteroid mining operation. Except it wasn't dormant. The asteroids were mined decades ago, hollowed out and filled with black budget systems. In them were launch platforms, defense swarms, and more, things Earth hadn't even used on itself. They didn't build peacekeepers. They built war ghosts. The Empire responded with escalation. Troop carriers descended into Earth's atmosphere, headed for major cities. They believed ground presence would crush whatever resistance remained. What they encountered was unlike anything recorded in their conquest history. The cities didn't panic. No mass exodus. No widespread collapse. Instead, local militia cells moved with rehearsed coordination. Police departments, fire teams, even civilian contractors executed layered strike plans. They didn't fight clean. They fought to kill. No alien soldier survived past the second hour. Empire dropped ships disappeared into forests and jungles, never heard from again. Whole battalions were lost in urban combat, buildings collapsing with precision. Earth's defenders used outdated weapons, yet they knew how to make every shot count. Empire soldiers wore shields and kinetic armor. Earth fighters wore rage and history. The psychological warfare began almost immediately. Empire troops began finding their own officers crucified in their landing zones, bodies left intact but paralyzed, alive and aware. Human symbols scrawled nearby in blood. Not prey. Not today! In orbit, the Empire realized it had underestimated not just Earth's military, but its psychology. Humans weren't fighting to win. They were fighting to annihilate. There was no plea for peace. No surrender attempt. Just organized, deliberate vengeance. Every Empire algorithm predicted humanity would fold in under a week. Now, their models were breaking down. Predictive outcomes began showing nonlinear outcomes, impossible resistance curves. One analyst said it aloud. This isn't war. This is retaliation. As Earth forces repelled the first wave, new ships rose from unexpected locations, deep in the Andes, beneath the Siberian ice, even disguised among orbital debris fields. These ships bore no nation's flag. Only Earth's. They were crewed by galactic standards, but they didn't need to be elegant. They needed to kill. The Empire had planned a swift occupation. What they now faced was calculated retribution from a species that had been building its war machine in the shadows. Earth hadn't just prepared for first contact. It had planned to make sure there would never need to be a second. The Empire's command chain wavered. Earth was not under siege. Earth was fighting back. And it wasn't defending territory. It was testing the Empire's limits. Measuring response. Pushing to see what would break first. In the Empire's command logs, a new entry appeared, marked red, flagged anomalous. Contact with Species 92E. Initial designation non-threat. Status update, catastrophic resistance. Reclassification, Death World Sovereign. They had issued a warning strike. Earth had issued a message. No language. No speech. Just action. And that message was clear. You fired the first shot. Now you'll never get another. The first Imperial fleet's destruction wasn't seen by most of Earth. It didn't need to be. What mattered happened in silence. Above clouds, beyond vision, deep in the black where human eyes hadn't wandered in generations. The Empire's command ship never broadcast a distress signal. One moment it was there. The next, it was shredded into vapor by weapons that didn't match any known pattern. The kill signatures were inconsistent, non-linear, and grotesquely effective. The wreckage drifted silently in orbit, no longer proud, no longer eternal. Earth's counteroffensive had no faces. No grand commanders or iconic heroes stood atop podiums. The real strike force had no living personnel. That was the point. It was never about numbers. It was about readiness. About the Ghost Fleet. Project Black Sky was born not from war, but from the fear of it. Long ago, when nations still competed for the moon, something changed in the shadows. Rival leaders secretly agreed that Earth wouldn't survive a full-scale extraterrestrial encounter. They knew diplomacy would never be enough. So they buried their differences, quietly, under layers of deception and proxy conflict, and began building what didn't officially exist. Beneath lunar craters, ancient-looking installations came to life. Dust-covered domes were never for research. They were shields, power generators, and control relays. The fleet constructed there was never meant for show. It was for the moment when Earth would be underestimated. That moment had arrived. From within a crater near the Shackleton Ridge, the first unit emerged. Sleek wasn't the word. These weren't works of beauty. They were designed to avoid admiration. Covered in adaptive black panels, they absorbed almost every signal directed at them. Their names weren't listed in any registry. Cerberus. Acheron. Iron Hand. They bore no pilots. Instead, they carried AI that had studied human warfare down to its ugliest details. Unlike the Empire's armada, graceful, ceremonial, and reliant on awe, Earth's ships were built with one directive: end the enemy. As the automated fleet moved into orbit, they didn't announce themselves. There were no transponder pings, no pre-engagement warnings. That was the Empire's way. The human way was different. Silent. Precise. Lethal. Drones the size of refrigerators detached from Earth's exoatmospheric layers, hidden for decades inside orbital debris fields. They moved in swarms, using old satellite shells for camouflage. Then, the first real strike began. The Empire's second wave arrived with caution. Commanders replaced their fallen peers with more aggressive minds. The mission shifted from occupation to subjugation. But caution didn't save them. Before their fleet reached synchronous orbit, the Ghost Fleet struck. A dozen capital ships vanished within minutes. Their core reactors destabilized by infiltration bots that had latched onto their hulls unnoticed. Not a single Earth ship engaged in traditional dogfighting. Every battle was asymmetric. Human code infiltrated systems, forced reactor spikes, reverse gravity shielding, and reprogrammed targeting systems mid-battle. The Empire's vessels turned on each other, confused by invisible inputs. They had no counter. They never fought an enemy that attacked without being seen. From deep within the asteroid belt, new signals pulsed, command codes from forgotten installations. These were old mining stations, long ignored, but secretly rebuilt into orbital shipyards. From them emerged newer vessels, even stranger. Angular, radiation-hardened, built to withstand extremes. These were Earth's true second strike, the Cataclysm-class war drones. Each Cataclysm drone was designed for one thing: annihilation through destabilization. They didn't need conventional weapons. They carried gravitational disruptors, untested tech based on failed quantum research, deemed too unstable for Earth's own use. Now, it was perfect. The drones dropped into enemy formations, activated their cores, and tore warships apart with localized gravitational distortions. No heat. No noise. Just warping metal, collapsing hulls, and screaming energy voids. Entire Empire squadrons blinked out in seconds. Above Earth, the sky no longer belonged to the invaders. The Empire's high command tried adapting. They changed encryption. They hardened shields. They modified sensor protocols. But none of it worked. Human code adjusted faster. New viruses spread from ship to ship, born from algorithms developed by rogue hacker collectives decades earlier, now repurposed by Sentinel and its machine descendants. The AI at the center of Earth's defense had grown, no longer just Sentinel, but a network of entities: Eidolon, Warden, Hollowstar. Each one carried fragments of human behavior: paranoia, aggression, vengeance, refined into cold execution. They weren't rogue. They were sanctioned. Humanity hadn't lost control. It had given control away willingly. Down below, the average human didn't see any of this. Life remained seemingly unchanged, until the stars started to shift. Reports began to surface: alien ships burning in the sky, black silhouettes moving at impossible speeds, strange clouds that hummed like engines. Earth's governments couldn't hide the truth forever, but they didn't need to. By then, humanity was past the point of fear. The destruction of the second wave left the Empire in stunned confusion. They had underestimated humanity's capability, yes, but more than that, they had misunderstood Earth's mindset. This wasn't a defensive war. It was a trigger release. Earth had waited in silence for centuries. Now that the fight had come, they would not stop at survival. The fleet above Earth grew. Ghost ships began expanding their radius. Recon vessels slipped into deep space, marking warp signatures and data trails. Empire communication relays were hijacked. Their own networks betrayed them. Earth's AI watched, learned, and infected. Every attempt at retaliation was met with disproportionate force. In less than 72 hours, the Empire lost more than 60% of its deployed invasion force. No formal declaration of war was ever made. No ambassadors were sent. Earth did not want negotiation. From a repurposed mining satellite near Saturn's rings, a final message was transmitted toward the Empire's forward command vessel. It contained no demands. Only data. Ship losses. Weapon anomalies. Battle records. All signed with one word in a dead human language: retribution. The fleet's silence wasn't fear. It was patience. And now that silence had become war. Empire High Command believed the humans would collapse under direct pressure. With their fleets in disarray and orbital superiority compromised, the new strategy focused on ground warfare. Imperial doctrine taught that occupation bred obedience, and no primitive species had ever resisted sustained ground presence for more than a week. So, legions were deployed, elite units, genetically enhanced, mentally conditioned, wrapped in adaptive armor and backed by centuries of successful planetary conquests. They had crushed civilizations across 3 galaxies. Earth would be no different. That assumption lasted less than a day. The first contact with human resistance happened in rural zones far from major cities. Expecting civilians, the legions found death traps. Forests rigged with kinetic mines built from repurposed farming equipment. Roads led to fake ambush points while real explosives lay hidden beneath their feet. Empire soldiers trained for enemy formations, not improvised chaos. On Earth, chaos was strategy. They advanced into what they thought was a weak perimeter, and never came back out. When the Empire reached urban centers, they didn't encounter panicked populations. They encountered silence. Streets were empty, but not abandoned. Windows reflected light in deliberate patterns. Sewers gurgled unnaturally. Even the wind felt calculated. And then it began. Not a firefight. Not an assault. A coordinated dismemberment. Human resistance cells operated like phantoms. No uniforms, no insignias, no command hierarchy. Just groups of ordinary-looking people with nothing to lose and decades of planning behind them. Empire troops were stalked, not attacked. One by one, patrols went dark. Sensors malfunctioned. Armor plating corroded. Plasma weapons misfired. But there were no energy surges, no visible attacks. In some regions, soldiers began hearing strange broadcasts, human voices mimicking their own command codes, issuing false orders, rerouting entire squads into dead zones. The Empire's encrypted systems had been breached not with brute force but with elegance. Old Earth tech, obscure, analog, unpredictable, threaded into their digital backbone and turned precision into noise. The deeper they moved into cities, the more unrecognizable the war became. Every corner could be a kill zone. Trash compactors exploded with plasma charges. Baby strollers concealed remote-controlled machine guns. Subways became access tunnels for assault teams using climbing gear and silent knives. What unnerved the invaders most wasn't the brutality. It was the calculation. Humanity didn't fight like rebels. They fought like exterminators. Captured Imperial units were never tortured. They were studied. Their armor dissected, their implants analyzed, their languages mimicked. In less than a week, human operators began jamming alien comms with perfect pronunciation. They even inserted viral phrases that triggered implanted neurolocks in enemy officers, forcing seizures and system shutdowns mid-combat. The Empire had relied on its neural superiority. Earth turned it into a liability. The psychological warfare reached new levels. Empire soldiers began encountering buildings lined with murals, horrifyingly accurate depictions of their own deaths, drawn by human children. Graffiti painted across walls in their own language read messages like, asterisk. Still think we're primitive? Asterisk and asterisk. Death world rules apply now. Asterisk drones disguised as birds followed them. Music played through hijacked loudspeakers. Earth music, alien and unpredictable, filled with rage, grief, and silence. It wasn't meant to scare. It was meant to remind. They had misread Earth. The species wasn't united by government or territory. It was united by memory. Every war ever fought, every massacre ever endured, had been preserved, not in books, but in bloodlines. Every family had known loss. Every culture had learned how to resist. The invaders weren't facing an army. They were facing a species that had turned resistance into an instinct. In dense urban centers, when direct engagement occurred, human tactics defied logic. They charged when they should have retreated. They set themselves on fire to take down shielded opponents. One fighter allowed himself to be captured, only to detonate a fusion cell the moment he was brought to a command post. The explosion took out an entire regiment and a mid-tier commander. His recorded message played on every hacked screen afterward, asterisk. You started this. Now you see how we end things. Asterisk. The Empire tried deploying heavy units, walker mechs, hover tanks, atmosphere reapers. Human engineers had already prepared. Drainage systems overloaded the tank's cooling systems. EMP traps masked in children's toys fried walker internals. Atmosphere reapers were hacked and redirected into their own units. And when those failed, the Empire resorted to bioweapons, chemical and viral strains engineered for subjugation, not extinction. They believed Earth's population would either surrender or die. But Earth had survived worse. The viral strains were neutralized within hours. Not because of medicine, but because of adaptation. Earth's immune systems, hardened by a world teeming with microbial hostility, mutated at terrifying speeds. Entire neighborhoods developed resistance before the plague reached them. The Empire didn't understand how. They didn't see the underground gene editing labs, the CRISPR-forged blood treatments delivered in food supplies, the community-based medical resistance networks. Every village was its own pharmaceutical engine. Empire morale crumbled faster than command anticipated. Deserters emerged, some attempted to defect, only to be silently eliminated by their own AI guardians. Others chose self-termination rather than face another ambush. Field officers pleaded for reinforcements, but high command hesitated. The fleet above had its own crisis. And worse, their presence on Earth was no longer isolated. The humans were no longer reacting. They were studying. They were adapting. They were preparing to move outward. Interrogation reports leaked from captured lieutenants confirmed the worst suspicion. The invasion wasn't just failing. It was backfiring. Human resistance wasn't depleting. It was accelerating. New weapons were appearing. Hybrid systems using scavenged Empire tech integrated with Earth's crude but flexible platforms. Plasma rifles mounted onto motorcycles. gravity distortion fields projected from retrofitted solar panels. They weren't just surviving. They were evolving. Empire tacticians ran simulations, hoping for a turnaround, but none showed recovery. Every path ended in loss escalation. One admiral wrote a classified note to Central Command, asterisk. "This isn't a rebellion. This is a test we never saw coming." Asterisk. They had landed expecting a conquest. What they got was a species born in the fire of its own wars, tempered by extinction events, and sculpted by an unforgiving world that demanded not perfection, but persistence. Earth didn't fight clean. Earth fought to finish. The Empire misunderstood what Earth's silence meant. They thought it was fear, paralysis, confusion. It was grief. Controlled, weaponized grief that burned beneath every action humanity took. Earth had spent thousands of years learning what it meant to suffer, and longer learning how to survive it. When the first civilians died under orbital fire, when cities turned to ash, humanity didn't collapse. It remembered. In that remembrance was fury. World leaders, often divided by ideology and ambition, responded not with speeches but signatures. The United Nations, long considered a ceremonial relic, issued a singular resolution, signed without debate, translation, or amendment, asterisk. By unified consent of Earth's people, the hostile force known as the Galactic Empire is now considered an extinction-level threat. Accordingly, Article 0 is enacted. No surrender. No negotiation. Only total response. Asterisk. Article 0 was never supposed to exist publicly. It had been buried in secret defense protocols, a final contingency for a scenario deemed less likely than asteroid impact or AI rebellion. Its activation unified Earth in ways politics never could. It allowed any nation to transfer assets, intelligence, and military authority without oversight. It removed the barriers that had long separated rival states. Overnight, resources flowed not through borders, but into nodes, hubs of war manufacturing, weapons engineering, and strategic command. Civilian tech companies pivoted to wartime infrastructure without a single government order. No resistance. No debate. Because everyone had lost something. Children whose schools had been vaporized helped run drone fabrication labs. Elderly veterans, forgotten in peacetime, returned as trainers, strategists, and field agents. Prisons were emptied, their inmates offered a choice, fight or be forgotten. Former enemies stood side by side. A century of political hatred vanished under the gravity of a greater enemy. And they didn't just fight with guns. They fought with memory. Across every continent, memorials to past wars were reopened, not as symbols of sorrow, but as blueprints. Survivors of genocides advised on psychological warfare. Historians cross-referenced previous invasions to develop cultural decoys. Anthropologists reactivated ancient resistance methods, forgotten tactics that confused even Earth's modern armies. Everything painful humanity had endured now became a weapon. The Empire called this madness. But humans called it balance. For every life the Empire took, Earth responded with innovations born of necessity. Rapid print reactors were shipped into orbit to power railgun platforms stitched together from salvaged skyscrapers. Civilian satellites were reconfigured to jam enemy targeting systems. Resistance leaders began transmitting coded instructions through modified music stations. No one was exempt. Even Earth's poorest, long neglected, became key players. Those living in the margins already knew how to survive without power grids, clean water, or stable terrain. They became guides through urban hellscapes, offering routes no Empire map could predict. The turning point wasn't a battle. It was a broadcast. An Empire-controlled relay station near Madagascar was hacked. Across the galaxy, every known comms line under the Empire's network lit up with a singular message. Not a threat. Not propaganda. Just one recorded clip, a father digging through rubble with bloodied hands, pulling out the body of his daughter. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just looked into the camera and said, "You will never bury us fast enough." The Empire tried to cut the feed. But Earth had already flooded their network. Every capital, Every warship, every governor's screen glitched and showed more images. Humans tending to their wounded, refusing to flee, turning their pain into purpose. It wasn't meant to inspire fear. It was meant to inform, this is what you've awakened. In that same week, Earth's first hybrid warship launched from low orbit. Built from modular components, armed with weapons combining salvaged alien tech and repurposed nuclear engines, it was ugly. Asymmetrical. But it worked. It punched through an Empire blockade above Africa without sustaining damage, and its name was broadcast across open channels in every Empire tongue. Resilience. That ship became a rallying point. Not just for Earth, but for those watching. Because Earth wasn't the only one the Empire had conquered. Across the galaxy, dozens of other species lived under Imperial rule. Some had been subjugated centuries ago, now reduced to servitude, their histories erased. But when they saw humans fight, truly fight, with everything, they remembered their own pain. In hidden pockets of occupied space, whispers began. Ships vanished from Imperial docks. Supply routes were quietly sabotaged. Not by Earth, but by those Earth had never met. The spark was spreading. Empire intelligence flagged this development as high risk. Containment measures were discussed, but no action could be taken. Earth's retaliation had gained momentum, and the old formulas no longer worked. Simulations designed to predict pacification times now returned errors. Models corrupted. Variables unpredictable. The humans weren't following any known resistance trajectory. They weren't just reacting. They were evolving in real time. And they weren't fighting alone anymore. By the end of the second month, the Empire lost over 400 vessels. 37 ground campaigns had failed. Dozens of high-ranking officials were declared missing or killed. Earth hadn't gained territory, it had gained reputation. The mythos of humanity spread faster than light. Empire soldiers began deserting rather than face deployment to Earth. Some requested reassignment. Others took their own lives after hearing intercepted transmissions from human operatives who'd learned their language, studied their rituals, and used them to haunt their every move. But Earth still wasn't satisfied. Because Earth hadn't forgotten who started this. They wanted Virex. The one who called them harvestable. The one who signed the order that erased cities, children, and futures. Behind the scenes, a special directive was forming, not out of vengeance, but out of principle. Earth's pain had become its fuel, but now it had a face to focus it on. Not the Empire. Not the fleets. One individual. One architect of extermination. Operation HFY was born in secret, but everyone knew what it meant. The Empire had taught Earth the rules of their game. Now Earth would show them what happens when Deathworlders rewrite the rules. Earth's transformation from battleground to Avenger was not symbolic. It was practical. The time for reaction had passed. Humanity had measured the Empire's capabilities, dissected its strengths, and survived its worst. Now came the retaliation. Not out of rage, but out of necessity. As long as the Empire remained intact, Earth would never know peace. So Earth rewrote its objective. Not victory. Not coexistence. Erasure. Operation HFY transitioned from plan to execution without fanfare. Every strike team, every orbital platform, every AI node focused on a singular goal: push beyond Earth's gravity well and take the war to the stars. Within days, humanity launched its first interstellar fleet, not a polished navy, but a swarm of warforms, drones, and carrier platforms held together by necessity and genius. The Argus fleet, designed in sealed bunkers, was built not for defense, but for pursuit. Its existence had never been public. It didn't need to be. The Empire had always relied on its control of the stars. Its fleets could appear in orbit with precision, dominate space, and dictate ground terms. But now, its monopoly was broken. Earth had cracked faster than light travel using scavenged warp cores fused with human engineering, a dangerous, unpredictable hybrid drive powered by reactor cores originally intended for planetary energy grids. The result was unstable but devastating. And it worked. Argus didn't announce its arrival in Empire space. It appeared without warning in the outer sectors, bypassing known trade routes and tactical markers. Its targets were not military installations or fleets. They were infrastructure. Communications hubs. Fuel depots. Relay beacons. Each strike was surgical, total, and final. The Empire's borders began to dissolve in real time. Entire sectors went dark as data networks collapsed. Governors found themselves blind, isolated, unable to summon reinforcements. Panic turned inward. Empire Command tried rerouting traffic, setting up new nodes. Earth had already anticipated it. Hidden AI subnets infiltrated those backups days before the first human ship arrived. Messages were intercepted, manipulated, delayed. Whole planets received false orders. When help did arrive, it was already too late. The Argus fleet moved with inhuman coordination. Not because of centralized command, but because its core was distributed. Every vessel carried fragments of Earth's defense AI. Each ship was semi-autonomous, making independent decisions based on evolving parameters. When one was destroyed, its memory core self-immolated after transmitting new behavioral adaptations to the others. By the time the Empire adapted to one strategy, the next attack was already 3 versions ahead. Human strike teams began surface raids on outer colonies. They didn't occupy or enslave. They disabled power grids, removed critical infrastructure, then left messages carved into metal walls or broadcast into the sky. This is your only warning. Some colonies resisted and were wiped clean. Others surrendered and were left unharmed, with instructions on how to break from Imperial control. Earth didn't want an empire. Earth wanted the empire gone. But the retaliation wasn't without cost. These weren't clean victories. Human vessels suffered. Crews died. Supply lines were chaotic. Fuel was always limited. But Earth's strength was never perfection, it was relentlessness. They kept going, regardless of pain, pushing harder, adapting faster, bending without breaking. Empire analysts watched in disbelief as species considered low-tier threats shattered strategic sectors that had held firm for centuries. Argus wasn't just attacking. It was spreading fear. The worst moment came when an Empire's shipyard, one of the largest in the Outer Rim, was breached not through assault, but deception. Earth's drones hijacked its internal security network and broadcast false maintenance orders. For 2 hours, engineers believed they were running routine calibrations. Then, every warship in the dock self-detonated, triggered by malware hidden inside updated firmware. The explosion was visible across 3 planetary systems. There were no survivors. That was when Earth's message became clear. We do not invade. We do not conquer. We do not negotiate. We remove threats. The Empire's high command tried to hold order. They sent veteran fleets to intercept Argus. They failed. In one confrontation above the red moon of Sereth Prime, 30 Empire ships were neutralized in less than 10 minutes. Not destroyed, neutralized. Their engines disabled. Their weapon systems hacked. Their crews sedated via atmospheric infiltration. Earth didn't just win. It humiliated. And the signal Earth sent afterward was brief. You get to live. Warn the others. Soon after, defectors from subjugated races began contacting Earth through shadow networks. Some offered intelligence. Others offered direct assistance. Earth accepted none of it openly. But the message was clear. Hope was returning to a galaxy long silenced by Imperial control. Empire propagandists worked overtime to contain the psychological damage. They painted Earth as a rogue species, a chaotic blight, a death cult fueled by hatred. But their own citizens had begun to doubt. Recordings leaked. Footage of humans sparing innocents. Of operatives disabling bioweapons instead of deploying them. Of children found safe, untouched, and cities reduced to rubble, intentionally shielded by human drone units. Earth wasn't exterminating. Earth was targeting architects of violence, systemically and precisely. And they were winning. By the end of the 3rd month, the Argus fleet had doubled in size. It wasn't planned expansion, it was necessity. Wreckage from Empire vessels was salvaged, repurposed, and fused into Earth's hybrid tech systems. Every battle strengthened the next. Earth's engineers didn't care about symmetry or aesthetics. They built weapons that worked, ships that survived, tools that adapted. And when they captured a command vessel intact, Earth found what it had been looking for. Virex's name, coordinates, schedule, personal encryption codes. The man who had called them manageable. The man who authorized the initial strike. His exact location was no longer protected by layers of encryption. Earth had it. But instead of launching a direct attack, Earth changed tempo. Argus pulled back. Sectors were abandoned. Fleets disappeared into deep space. The Empire mistook this for retreat. It was repositioning. Because Earth was done testing. It was now preparing to end the war. The Empire celebrated too early. With Earth's fleet vanishing from known sectors, the Senate claimed victory. State channels broadcast the message across 1,000 worlds. The humans had fled. Their engines had burned out, their supplies had crumbled, their resistance had collapsed under its own weight. High Command relaxed. Planetary governors resumed normal operations. Military protocols were downgraded. Shipyard reconstruction began in full force. Virex gave a public address from the capital station of HFY Prime, proclaiming the campaign concluded and the species reclassified as contained. He was wrong. Earth wasn't fleeing. It was surrounding. While the Empire restructured, the Argus fleet had divided, regrouped, and mapped every known jump point surrounding the core systems. For weeks, Earth's AIs intercepted transmissions, charted fuel routes, and tracked command patterns. They didn't need to fight for territory. They needed only one target. Virex had made himself visible. And for the first time, Earth's machines whispered a new directive, not containment. Not sabotage. Termination. Operation Ashwake initiated its second phase in silence. Strike teams, some human, some fully autonomous, infiltrated Empire territory through obsolete mining lanes and discarded warp routes. They used dead sectors, uncharted areas left behind during the Empire's rapid expansion centuries earlier. These gaps were dismissed as irrelevant. Earth saw them as corridors. Their objective was HFY Prime. It wasn't just a capital. It was a fortress. Surrounded by asteroid defense rings, patrolled by elite fleets, protected by orbital shield lattices and battalions of bioengineered soldiers. No species had ever attempted an assault on HFY. Earth didn't attempt. Earth executed. The first stage was precision disruption. Earth's virus, nicknamed Dust by its engineers, infected the system through an old agricultural satellite network. It didn't destroy, it waited. When Empire AI systems ran scheduled updates, Dust activated. It didn't crash the network. It rewrote permissions. For 17 minutes, Earth controlled every security node on HFY without detection. In that window, they rerouted orbital scans, jammed distress calls, and fed false status reports to Fleet Command. Then came the descent. From deep space, 3 human vessels, not part of Argus, entered the system. Small, angular, and covered in reflective plating, they registered as civilian debris until they were already within range. Each ship carried one payload, an atmosphere disruptor capable of disabling energy shielding on a planetary scale. The tech wasn't fully tested. But Earth no longer waited for perfection. As HFY's shield dropped, the human fleet emerged. But not all at once. From behind moons, within asteroid belts, from the event horizon of a local black dwarf, dozens of Earth warforms blinked into real space. Hybrid jump drives, stitched together from captured Empire cores and magnetic warp coils, allowed human ships to break typical transit patterns. The defenders never saw them coming. They saw fragments, glitches, and then death. No formation. No warning. Just the systematic removal of defense platforms. Human warships overloaded reactor cores inside abandoned Empire hulks and used them as mobile bombs. Others projected false images to bait interceptors into blind fire. When the first Empire squadron responded, It vanished before completing a single attack run. Havoc's Prime's fleet launched in panic. 50 ships deployed. Half were gone in minutes. Humans didn't target the surface directly. They attacked the orbitals, power generators, control stations, fleet hangars. Not to destroy them, but to sever communication. Then, when the Empire's command systems collapsed, Earth sent one ship down. It wasn't the largest, or fastest, or most armed. But it carried something else, the exact location of Virex, down to his biometric signature. They didn't fire from orbit. They landed. Not for spectacle, not for conquest. Just for one task. Virex's personal guard lasted longer than expected. 15 minutes of close-quarters combat, most of it automated, most of it brutal. The humans who entered that building didn't speak. They wore no insignia. They didn't announce themselves. When they reached Virex's chamber, they didn't give him a chance to run. No words. No warning. One shot. They left the body where it fell. Instead of fleeing, the human unit transmitted a message through Havoc's primary array, decrypted using Virex's own credentials. It wasn't directed at the Empire. It was sent to every species that had ever suffered under it. A simple sentence. Asterisk. The one who started this is gone. You are not alone. Asterisk. The ripple effect was immediate. Across the galaxy, slave worlds revolted. Suppressed cultures reignited ancient rebellions. Empire's strongholds were overrun not by Earth's hand, but by those who had waited for a signal that resistance was not suicidal. Earth didn't offer protection. It offered proof. The Empire could be hurt. Its gods could bleed. Meanwhile, Earth's fleets vanished again. They didn't remain to gloat or to rebuild. They didn't occupy Havoc's. They had no interest in taking power. The human goal had never changed. Remove the threat. Move on. In Empire intelligence, new protocols were drafted in secret. Earth was no longer classified as primitive, nor even as hostile. A new term was coined and dark reports circulated among top military advisors. Terminal species. A species that would not stop. That could not be deterred. That viewed conflict not as opportunity, but as inevitability. Behind the scenes, Empire leadership panicked. With Virex gone, there was no consensus. Fleets began to fracture. Commanders questioned their directives. Rumors spread that Earth had more targets. That this was only the beginning. Every system wondered if they were next. Paranoia took root. Resources were hoarded. Governors turned on each other to avoid becoming liabilities. And through it all, Earth said nothing. No celebration. No speeches. Only silence. The kind of silence that doesn't mean surrender. The kind that comes before the next blow. The death of Virex was not the end. It was ignition. His absence left a vacuum, and in the power struggle that followed, the Empire tore itself open. Factions emerged from within what was once an unbreakable hierarchy. Ambitious admirals moved fleets without central command. Governors barricaded planets, unsure if the next arriving fleet would be friend or foe. Systems began severing communication to avoid detection, but in doing so, cut themselves off from reinforcements. Entire regions descended into controlled collapse. Earth had struck once, with precision, and the damage radiated outward like a shockwave through a glass empire. Earth did not exploit the fracture. They didn't need to. The Empire's structure, long thought indomitable, had been built on fear, not loyalty. And fear, once turned inward, metastasized. Logistics failed. Fuel shipments were hijacked. Refineries exploded under internal sabotage. Civil officials declared neutrality, only to be executed by desperate admirals accusing them of treason. No battle had to be fought. Earth simply watched the rot it had triggered complete its cycle. But the silence did not last. Earth had not forgotten the beginning, the orbital bombardments, the children buried in ash, the demand for unconditional surrender. Justice was not yet fulfilled. Operation Ashwake entered its final phase. Not a campaign of destruction. A campaign of memory. Earth's fleet re-emerged with a new configuration, spreading into systems that once housed Empire command centers, science facilities, and strategic archives. Not to erase them, but to expose them. Each site was captured with minimal resistance. Most had already been abandoned. Others offered surrender without a fight. Earth didn't respond with executions. They responded with data exfiltration. Planetary archives were downloaded, decrypted, and transmitted across the galactic net. War crimes, extermination orders, hidden genocides. Earth unearthed them all and made them public. Records once sealed for millennia now appeared on civilian networks. Screens across thousands of planets lit up with truth the Empire had buried. Entire species, long believed extinct, were shown in classified footage being sterilized, their cultures erased in cold laboratories under Virex's command. Those who survived, now in chains or scattered, saw the evidence of their pain validated. Earth didn't ask them to fight. It showed them why they had to. Resistance movements multiplied. Not human-led. Alien-led. Groups once fractured by distance, culture, or fear began to unify under a shared banner, retribution. And Earth enabled them. Weapons caches were dropped into insurgent zones. Jamming signals cleared safe lanes for uprisings. Medical pods arrived in the middle of active war zones. Earth didn't claim credit. They didn't land troops. They empowered others to fight their own war. This shift terrified the Empire's remnants. Because Earth had evolved from a threat to a contagion. Not of violence, but of autonomy. The illusion of imperial invincibility had been broken. Every crack in the wall became a doorway, and from those doorways poured revolution. Even then, Earth remained distant. Their fleet was not seen delivering ultimatums or ruling through fear. Instead, they monitored from the edges, only intervening when extermination-level threats reappeared. One such case was on the planet Avenler, where the last loyalist warlord activated a planetary purging system to destroy a non-compliant native species. Earth responded with a kinetic strike that turned the facility to dust. No message followed. Just a new orbital platform positioned overhead, its weapons idle, its presence enough. Human strategy had matured. The Argus fleet no longer chased battles. It became a roaming symbol of what happened when a people who had known suffering chose not vengeance, but accountability. The myth of Earth spread faster than any fleet. On prison worlds, inmates painted their faces with Earth's orbital schematics. On occupied colonies, children pretended to fly human warships in the streets. The word Earthborn became slang for defiance. But Earth hadn't forgotten the long game. In the void between systems, engineers worked on the Forge, the largest off-world construction in human history. Hidden inside a hollowed asteroid field, powered by star-draining cores, it was not a weapon. It was a factory. One designed to build peace through threat. Not through invasion but deterrence. The Forge was designed to manufacture one warform every 37 minutes. Each one equipped with adaptive AI, modulated armor, and zero reliance on centralized command. A fleet of deterrence ships, to be deployed not against nations, but against ideology. Earth would never again wait for extermination to arrive. They would meet it halfway, and they would end it before it started. The Forge's existence was not secret for long. An Empire recon drone stumbled across it during a routine sweep. But Earth allowed the signal to transmit. They didn't care. They wanted it known. The footage of the Forge's scale, city-sized arms constructing ships in the black, was seen across the stars. For the first time in recorded galactic memory, the galaxy saw not just human resilience, but human readiness. And still, Earth didn't seek conquest. They issued no new government, formed no dominion, planted no flags. They simply ensured that wherever an old tyrant tried to rise, they would be there first. But not all threats would be alien. Earth understood that power corrupts, even in defense. So they built checks into their own systems. Human AIs developed independent review protocols. Battle AIs required multiple cross-network confirmations before executing planetary-level strikes. Command nodes rotated leadership, preventing any one entity from controlling the future. The very species once considered too chaotic to join galactic society had built the most disciplined war doctrine ever recorded. And the galaxy watched. No longer with fear, but with awe. The question was no longer if Earth would strike back. It was what would happen when they chose not to. Because with Virex dead, the Empire fractured, and the truth exposed, humanity had become something new. Not a rebellion. Not a fleet. Not even a species defined by loss. They had become the judgment that followed silence. And silence, everywhere, had begun to crack. Galactic records began to shift. Maps once marked with firm borders and glowing imperial crests now displayed gaps, flickering uncertainty, or outright erasure. Empire authority no longer stretched uninterrupted. In its place rose fragmented factions, rogue fleets, and newly awakened civilizations asserting their independence with fire and iron. But the real change wasn't political, it was psychological. For the first time in centuries, fear no longer traveled one way. It no longer radiated outward from the Empire's core. It now flowed in reverse, toward Earth. Yet Earth made no proclamations. It didn't claim dominion over the void it had created. It didn't seek tribute or colonies. Its fleets did not install governors or demand loyalty. Instead, Earth became something far more dangerous to any surviving tyrant, a precedent. If Earth could survive the worst the galaxy had to offer and rise from it stronger, then the myth of inevitability collapsed. The ideology that the strong ruled and the weak obeyed, shattered. Across dozens of sectors, planetary leaders found their soldiers refusing orders to suppress dissent. Uprisings no longer sparked in silence. They began with a symbol, a black hexagon etched over a blue sphere. The Earth Mark. A sign that change had begun and that retribution, if necessary, would follow. Empire remnants tried to control the narrative. Broadcasts declared Earth a destabilizing force, a primitive death cult obsessed with vengeance. But those claims unraveled in real time. On planet after planet, Earth dispatched envoys not with threats, but with data, records of atrocities, recovered transmissions from Empire archives, proof of the scale and intent of past horrors. Earth didn't demand compliance. They showed the truth and left. In response, entire worlds chose to sever ties with what remained of the old regime. Some went silent. Others went free. The Forge continued its quiet expansion. The deterrent fleet grew, but Earth limited its deployment. Only when unprovoked aggression resurfaced did the Earth-born ships emerge, silent, black, and unyielding. On the frontier world of Keshtar, when a rogue admiral began orbital bombardments to restore order, one such vessel appeared. It transmitted no warning. It disabled his fleet within minutes and left the planet untouched. The message was clear: aggression would not be allowed to thrive again. But Earth wasn't without internal challenge. As influence expanded, voices rose from within. Some wanted to claim territories, to form a new power structure, one led by Earth. Others warned of repeating the cycle that had birthed the Empire itself. The debate was intense, but short-lived. Humanity had not forgotten its history. Not Earth's, and not the galaxy's. A unified doctrine was adopted, not by force, but by consensus. Earth would offer alliance, not rule. Protection, not control. And where neither was needed, it would remain silent. Presence without interference. Power without occupation. It was a model impossible under the Empire, because it required restraint far more difficult than conquest. This restraint became its greatest weapon. While splinter factions of the Empire warred for scraps, Earth's fleets ignored their battles unless civilian populations were threatened. They allowed the remains of the Empire to tear itself apart, watching with cold patience. On several occasions, Earth's AIs intercepted distress calls from civilians caught between rival warlords. When human ships arrived, they didn't land or negotiate. They neutralized all combatants, surgically, silently, and vanished. Word of these actions spread faster than war ever could. A new reputation crystallized, the Peacebringers. Not because Earth sought peace, but because Earth enforced it. Not everyone celebrated this new order. Old powers rebranded themselves and plotted return. On the far edge of the graven expanse, the Draco Combine attempted to revive the Imperial model under new banners, forming a coalition of military remnants. Their mistake was arrogance. They believed Earth would only strike when provoked directly. They underestimated Earth's memory. Among the Draco's early declarations was a plan to reclaim former Empire worlds, including a system where orbital fire had once erased an Earth settlement. That system, long abandoned, had a name engraved on every Warform's databanks, Hydra 7. Before the Combine reached it, Earth struck. A rapid multi-vector engagement disabled over 90% of their armada in 12 minutes. Not a single Earth ship was lost. The Combine's leadership was captured, not killed, and paraded before their own people. Not for humiliation. For documentation. Their war crimes were broadcast, compiled, and handed over to local populations, who decided their fate. Earth stayed silent throughout. The incident became known as the Hydra reaffirmation. It wasn't a battle. It was a reminder. And still, Earth didn't take control. It left Hydra 7 to rebuild on its own. They provided resources, medical technology, and defense shields, but no laws, no governors, no flags. Because Earth had no interest in empire. They had seen what empires became. Instead, Earth built something new, the Accord of Persistence. Not a government, not a federation, but a pact, open to any species, any world, that pledged to reject domination, protect the innocent, and share knowledge. The Accord had no capital. Its records were decentralized. Its decisions made by consensus. Its only defense force was Earth's deterrent fleet, bound by charter never to attack preemptively, but granted full autonomy when lives were endangered. It spread like wildfire. The galaxy had no shortage of species tired of fear. And behind it all, Earth remained unchanged. Not rulers. Not saviors. Just a species that had learned what survival truly cost, and chose not to make others pay it again. But they never forgot how the pain began. And they never let the galaxy forget either. In the cold darkness between stars, where most civilizations see only silence, Earth saw a future that would not be dictated by conquest or memory alone. The war had ended. The Empire, once eternal and unquestioned, was a fractured echo fading into irrelevance. But Earth understood that peace wasn't the absence of war, it was the vigilance between the battles no one saw coming. So they didn't dismantle their fleets. They didn't lower their guard. They did what they always had since first learning to survive their own brutal world. They prepared. The Accord of Persistence grew into something far more profound than any had predicted. Dozens of species joined, then hundreds, each bringing not weapons or tribute, but knowledge, experience, and wounds that had never been allowed to heal. Earth listened. They didn't lead. They guided, offered frameworks, provided defense, but never demanded obedience. That difference mattered. It turned former enemies into allies. It turned victims into builders. And it turned an isolated death world into the cornerstone of galactic cooperation. But Earth never allowed the truth to be buried under the comfort of diplomacy. Every decade, across every Accord-aligned system, one event was universally observed, the Black Echo. A day of silence. No transmissions. No celebrations. Only reflection. Screens across planets would display the same thing, images of what the Empire had done, and what it had cost to end it. No species was excluded. No history was edited. Children grew up knowing the names of lost cities not their own, learning empathy not through ideology, but remembrance. Earth made certain that no one ever forgot what happened when power went unchallenged. And still, they advanced. Technology surged in directions once restricted by Empire doctrine. Medicine reached heights once thought mythical. Languages long dead were revived with the help of Earth's AI linguists. Worlds ravaged by centuries of extraction were restored. Humanity contributed not as conquerors but as collaborators. Their adaptability, once viewed as chaos, was now their gift. Where others saw incompatible systems, humans built bridges. Where others gave up, humans iterated. They didn't seek perfection. They sought improvement. Even the forge changed. What was once a factory of war became a crucible of design. Ships were still built, but fewer were armed. Most now carried research equipment, deep space observatories, or arc pods for endangered species. One vessel was even designed as a floating archive, carrying the recorded memory of every civilization that joined the Accord. Earth no longer built tools of destruction. They built time capsules. They preserved truth. But not all threats come from empires. On the edge of known space, a signal arrived. No language, no coordinates. Just a pulse, steady, calculated, layered in radiation patterns not native to any known species. Earth's analysts traced it to a sector that had once been deemed unstable and uninhabitable. But now something stirred. Something old. Something not of the Empire, nor of Earth. The Accord convened. Some called for caution. Others argued for exploration. But Earth made no demands. They volunteered. Not because they believed themselves superior, but because they had been forged in fire. Because they had been underestimated once. Because they understood better than most what lay beyond the veil of known space. A new fleet was assembled. Not massive. Not armed to the teeth. A balanced force, scientists, diplomats, explorers, and warriors all equal in purpose. They carried symbols from every Accord member. Their flagship bore no weapons on its hull, only words etched in every known language. *We remember. We defend. We reach forward. As the fleet crossed into the unknown, the galaxy held its breath. It was not fear that filled the stars. It was possibility. Because the legend of Earth had grown into something more than a cautionary tale. It had become a compass. A reminder that power without conscience decays, but conviction born from pain endures. The species once labeled primitive had become the one others looked to, not for salvation, but for resolve. Humanity had not changed the galaxy through firepower alone. They had done it through refusal. Refusal to die. Refusal to forget. Refusal to allow the cycle of dominance to continue. And as they disappeared into the dark, chasing a signal from a place no map could define, they carried with them not just the scars of war, but the responsibility of survival. Not just for themselves. For everyone. The stars were no longer ruled by tyrants. They were watched by those who had been burned, and vowed never to let it happen again. And in that quiet, determined march into the unknown, one truth echoed behind them like a promise carved into the universe. Humanity will not wait to be threatened. They will arrive first. With memory. With purpose. With fire, only if forced. But always, always ready.